Thank you so much, everybody, and welcome. Welcome, everyone, to the Center for Archival Futures, or CAFE speaker series. I'm Katrina Fenlon. I'm the director of CAFE and assistant professor at the College of Information Studies. For those who haven't been with us before, CAFE was established last year to support interdisciplinary research, hands-on learning, and community partnerships at the intersection of archives and digital curation. And our mission is to collaborate with diverse communities and information professionals to democratize and preserve our records of knowledge and culture. So we have a speaker series that's our flagship event, which is held on the first Wednesday of each month during the semester. And I'll mention briefly that we have an upcoming talk as part of that series, which is on December 7th at 4 p.m. Please, somebody on my team, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's December 7th at 4 p.m. We will virtually host Lauren Spears, who is a Narragansett and executive director of the Tamaqua Museum, to share the strategies around decolonizing and indigenizing the policies, processes, and design of collections and archives in the museum. Very exciting. So before I hand off the mic to our host for today, Dr. Jessica Grimmer, let me first acknowledge that we're beaming in from College Park, Maryland, which is located on the ancestral territories of the Piscataway, Nacotchtank, and their indigenous kin and neighbors. As members of the University of Maryland, a land-grant university, let's acknowledge the 202,000 acres of stolen indigenous land distributed to the university under the Morrill Act in 1862, and the separation that these and many other acts of colonialism, assimilation, and genocide, including some acts of archival collecting, generated between indigenous peoples and their homelands. We honor the continued power and resilience of indigenous communities and nations and celebrate the collaborative and decolonizing work now taking place in our collections and our institutions. We further acknowledge the University of Maryland's connections to slavery and to generations of racialized trauma rooted in the institution. And we at CAFE are committed to supporting restorative history for this institution and reparative and restorative justice work in knowledge institutions more broadly. So I will now hand off to Dr. Jessica Grimmer, our gracious host for today.
Well, thank you so much, Katrina. Welcome everyone again to our talk today. This talk is part of a series of events in conjunction with the release of Persistent Vision, an online exhibit of the DC punk collections at the University of Maryland, specifically in special collections and performing arts, which has been critically acclaimed in media coverage, including the Washington Post, and was also recently awarded the C. Herbert Finch Online Publication Award by the Mid-Atlantic Regional Archives Conference. I'd like to particularly congratulate my colleagues John Davis and Ben Jackson on their work on this online exhibit. A second event in this series will happen tomorrow at the Michelle Smith Performing Arts Library, and that is a Wikipedia edit-a-thon. It will kick off at 4 p.m. and go through 7 p.m. We'll have a Wikimedia expert on hand, and we'll be editing, augmenting, and creating new pages related to DC Punk, drawing wherever possible on and pointing to our archival collections. Seating is limited, so we ask that you pre-register, and you can be in contact with me, and I can share the registration link with you and the password. Finally, we'll have a talk as part of the Musicology and Ethnomusicology Colloquium at 4 p.m. on Friday, December 2nd on zines in the DC Punk subculture, and that will be in the Leah Smith Hall, room 2200 in the Clarice Smith Performing Arts Center. I also want to thank the UMD Libraries and the UMD Arts for All initiative for their financial support of these events. Today, though, we will welcome Eric Hung and Jeff Krulik to CAFE. Eric Hung is the executive director of the Music of Asian American Research Center, curator of the Asian American and Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Learning Pathway for Smithsonian Folkways, and adjunct lecturer at the University of Maryland's College of Information Studies. Jeff Krulik is an independent video producer and director who has worked for the Discovery Channel and National Geographic. His popular culture documentaries include Heavy Metal Parking Lot and Led Zeppelin Played Here. In 2015, Krulik donated his papers to the special collections in the University of Maryland, documenting his work. Today, they offer their perspectives on the challenges and opportunities of curating and creating records of musical communities, working with musicians, constituent community members, fans, and collectors. They will discuss the types of materials accrued, the interest of group members in how their works are used by memory institutions, and the shifting views of traditional memory institutions. Welcome, Eric and Jeff. We're so happy to have you here, and I will go ahead and turn over the metaphorical microphone to Eric.
Okay, thank you so much. I see that several of my students are here. Thank you for coming. I don't see any of the musicians that I'm going to talk about here, but if you are here, you're very welcome to identify yourself and come into the conversation as well. Good afternoon. I want to thank Jess Grimmer for inviting me to be on this panel. I want to thank Jeff for sharing this space with me. And also the iSchool as well as the libraries for hosting this event. I'm joining you from Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land of the Lenni Lenape. I acknowledge the genocide, cultural genocide, and the active removal of the Lenape from their homelands. I also recognize their continued presence and resilience, and I thank the many Lenape and other indigenous people who have generally taught me so much over the past 2 decades. I'm going to share my screen because I'm going to show you some videos. In this presentation, I want to discuss and reflect on the music of Asian America Research Center's documenting Asian American Community Music Ensembles Initiative, or DACME. Community music ensembles perform many important functions, from providing a gathering space for community members to preserving heritage traditions, from playing weddings and festivals to teaching children in the community, and from creating spaces to imagine new identities, to performing feelings of belonging and citizenship. Despite these significant roles, community music ensembles are rarely documented by museums, archives, or special collections. Once groups stop performing and once their websites go down, finding any information about them, even the most important ones, can be very difficult. Let me provide one example. From the late 19th century through the 1960s, the majority of US residents saw people of Asian descent as perpetual foreigners who could never learn American ways of life. This is one key justification for exclusion acts and the incarceration of 120,000 people of Japanese descent during World War II. From the 1930s to the 1970s, Chinese American bugle and corps troops in Los Angeles battled these stereotypes. The Meiwa Drum Corps, the Zhonghua Drum and Bugle Corps, and the Los Angeles Chinese Drum and Bugle Corps represented the community in parades, concerts, and competitions by performing in this most American tradition at high levels. Here is a clip of the LA Chinese Drum and Bugle Corps from 1970. You will see that the sound and the video don't match, but that's all I have. As you saw, this is a sizable ensemble in a Chinese community that was not that large in those decades. Yet I, someone who has been doing research on Asian American music since 2008, just found out about them and the other Chinese American Drum and Bugle Corps a couple of years ago. And this is thanks to former members of the ensemble that have gathered towards a reunion. By undertaking the Document initiative, we hope to make community music ensembles and their impacts much more visible. We began this project with the help of an SAA Foundation grant in August 2019, and we started to work with ensembles in Arizona, California, Indiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, New York, North Carolina, Oregon, and Virginia. This work came to an abrupt halt for obvious reasons in March 2020, and we just relaunched the project this fall with a 2-month research trip to Los Angeles. We plan to continue collecting in 2023 and 2024, and to create a traveling museum exhibit and a virtual exhibit in 2025. At the end of this project, we hope to have documented 70 community music ensembles in at least 30 states. Researchers who have contributed to this project include Zhou Jiang, a member of the Slants, for those who know that group, Victoria Hun, Renchao Liu, who teaches at the University of Denver, Mandy Magnuson Hong, my partner. And I also want to thank the dozens of people who have helped us by recommending ensembles and writing introduction emails. To give you an idea of the scope of the project, here are the 18 groups that we worked with in Southern California. On this screen, you can see the 6 groups that work to preserve and disseminate musical traditions from Asia. 3 of them, Lak Hom, this is the wrong slide, this is the right slide. 3 of them, Lak Hom, the Suo Kayagum Ensemble, and the Hagum Love, are youth ensembles that are led by a master teacher or their assistants. Samahan is a semi-professional ensemble that performs various types of Filipino musics, and the Yue Opera Troupe is an adult ensemble led by amateurs who are very serious about this particular type of Chinese opera. Meanwhile, Angelus Del Sol class is led by retired professional and semi-professional Peking opera singers from China and Taiwan. And the members of this class are all over 70 years old and have some health issues. This is a free program, and you need to have a doctor's approval before you can participate in the activities at the Adult Day Health Care Center. One common thing that we heard from several of these ensembles is a feeling of precarity. They don't know how long they can continue to keep these groups going. In many ways, this is not surprising. The sustainability of musical traditions depends on various social conditions and infrastructures. In the United States, these often do not exist, and sometimes only a particular generation of immigrants are interested in putting in the resources to keep these traditions going in the US. Once this generation goes into retirement or passes away, the continuation of these ensembles becomes very difficult, and this applies to at least one of the ensembles on this list. On this screen, you can see 4 ensembles that try to preserve and disseminate musical traditions from Asia, but also adapt to conditions in the US in some significant way. Their views on how to adapt differs significantly. The director of ETMA, Vinod Venkataraman, believes that, quote, fusion is confusion. He includes drum sets and upright bass in his ensemble to extend and sustain the South Indian classical tradition, just as 19th century Indian musicians adopted the violin from Europe. Meanwhile, Bin He, the director of both the South Coast Chinese Cultural Center Orchestra and the String and Bamboo Music Ensemble, actively seeks hybridity. I will let him discuss his philosophy.
We do not want to do like an ordinary orchestra stuff because I've been doing ordinary traditional Chinese orchestra for many years since I was little, right? Yeah. And also, as I mentioned before, I really like pop music. So in this orchestra, we want to merge, orchestra-wise, we want to merge Chinese traditional instruments and the Western string instruments, as well as the rock band. the key for this, because we want to showcase Chinese instruments are capable to emerge with different culture, musical elements together, make something new, and then also make something unique belong to us.
The Korean American Youth Performing Arts Director is very interested in teaching her students a good cross-section of Korean arts, from traditional drumming to K-pop. It is an intensive program, and many of the students go to her studio for several hours every evening on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. It is hard to describe all that they do, so I will show you excerpts of 3 of the 6 pieces they rehearsed while we visited. On this screen, you can see 3 ensembles that we have called Asian American traditions. Taiko has a long history in Japan, but the kumi taiko or group taiko tradition that most US taikos participate in was developed largely by 3 California ensembles in the late 1960s and 1970s. Meanwhile, Stream of Praise creates Mandarin language praise songs. This group was founded in 1993, when there was very little contemporary music in Christian worship in Asia. They have since developed a huge following in East and Southeast Asia, and they toured the region for 2 months each year. However, the group and its office remain in Orange County. Here is a clip of founder Reverend Sandy Yu discussing the very early days of her music ministry.
And then we start to write songs and record and produce and make CDs, and then we started traveling around the world and just to lead people in worship. So that's how we started it, and because I think we started here because we gathered many young people around this area. We just wrote a letter, an invitation letter to as many people as I knew back then, and then we gather and we start to rehearse and start to gather, and everybody start to bond from different churches, different cities around in LA. So that was a fun time. I mean, now it's still a fun time, you know. So we started traveling. We start to feel like this is such an important thing, and so when we travel around, you know, people were shocked because we don't live in Asia, but we actually live in the States. And then
here are 3 popular music bands that we interviewed. With these groups, but particularly with Doctors and Engineers and Bitter Party, the topics of childhood and nostalgia came up with regularity. Here is an excerpt from our interview with 3 members of Doctors and Engineers. By the way, none of them are doctors or engineers. That is a requirement of the band that you not be one of those.
We were all friends before the band. I feel that it started with when I first met Shri, and we had conversations. We started bonding over shared history of music in our families, respective families, and how we bonded about talking about how music was an important part of our families, taught to, with our families. I played with my uncle a lot, playing old Indian songs. Shri, you were talking about
Yeah, I was putting South Indian classical music lessons as a kid, and sang a lot of folk music and things like that at temple and in family circles.
Yeah, playing for family, playing for cultural festivals and things as a kid even. And I remember what we talked about was, it was funny because at some point though, family tells you, okay, stop with this music stuff.
And their first EP basically are rock versions of these these songs that they learned as children. So yeah, finally, we worked with two ensembles that are really organizers. One group organized an open mic night event each Wednesday in historic Filipino town, and the other organized annual arts happenings. When Mandy and I decided to include these two groups as ensembles, we understood that this is a stretch. However, we felt that documentation was paramount because both did such important community building work. Here is an excerpt we did with 6 regulars at Recess Mic, the open mic event. The main speaker in this excerpt his name is Ariel. Please focus not just on what he says, but also the interactions with the other speakers.
But what were your first impressions when you entered the space?
I didn't like it.
Wherever that
What?
was.
Oh my god.
For real?
You guys were, yeah, no.
I came after you, so I don't know this
You weren't
story.
there. You were? No.
No.
Son Lou, you were there, right?
Why did you hate it? We wanted to know.
Yeah, we wanted
This is LA, everyone's an actor, if LA was a bowl of cereal, they'd all be frosted fakes. That's what they are. I walked in. How long did it take you to get ready for that line?
He's been sitting on that since 2018.
It was just
LA comedian.
Here's my card.
Go on.
It was, when you come into a space that's so supportive, that's so nice, you immediately think, you're like Ashton Kutcher's gonna pop up out of nowhere. You immediately just think this is not. There's got to be a catch to this, and I was immediately looking off. You
were suspicious.
Of course, I was suspicious. And like I saw Maddie, I saw Kookie, I saw Sun Lu, Kay, marking, and I was like, okay, they're very nice people. They're gonna try to sell me on a timeshare. Something's gonna happen.
This is MLM.
This is MLM. And then I started going, and it became a thing where I even actually went and sought guidance with our foundation, Arthur Kennedy, who I recommend interviewing as well.
Amazing.
And I went to his sanctuary, as you would call it, because it was up in the mountains, and I just said, hey man, come with me to this space. I don't think it's real. And I don't think it's real. And he came to this space like, everyone here is so nice, and I'm like, oh, I'm in the wrong.
Yes, it's you.
I hope this gives you an idea of our project. And if you know of any interesting Asian American music ensembles, please let me know. We will be collecting in the DMV and the Midwest in the coming months. And we plan to present our findings about the DMV at a symposium at Dunbarton Oaks next September. To close, I want to discuss my increasing discomfort with the discourse around community archiving in library and information science. More and more, I see community building and education to be my main goals at the Music of Asian America Research Center. To do this work, I do some archiving. Archiving is a necessary tool for this work, no more and no less. In reading the literature on community archiving, I get the sense that many scholars see archiving as an end rather than the tool. When I read articles that debate different definitions of community archives, I scream, who cares? When I look at articles with metadata and write statements, I wonder how many people who would ever use what my center has to offer would care. When I see discussions of ethics, I often find gaps between guidelines that archivists want to develop and the wishes of the specific people in the archival records. Yet, outside of Michelle Caswell's urgent archives and a few other articles, not just by Caswell, I don't see much that discusses how archivists can improve the lives of the communities that they serve. And isn't that the single most important point of community archiving? Thank you.
I'm up.
You are. I want to take a moment. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Eric. We're going to wait until the end to take questions. Although if you do have a burning question, feel free to put it in the Q&A and I will moderate the discussion at the end. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Eric, and we will pass the microphone off to Jeff.
Thanks, Jessica. I'm happy to be here participating in this. My name's Jeff Krulik. I went to the University of Maryland. I graduated in 1983, and I'm a local who lived and worked in Maryland my whole life. Going into filmmaking, I studied English though. I got a liberal arts degree. I did not go to study film, but I'm self-taught through the community television, which was local, and I pretty much. But my original interest was in radio and in concert promotion, and I worked at WMUC, of course, and I worked at with the Glass Onion Student Union concerts. But I really just had an ongoing interest in the culture that was going on around me, and of course the community, the punk rock community that was kind of springing up around like the alternative music. It wasn't even really particularly a punk thing. It was just something that was like not the mainstream. And so I just always had an interest in that. And I think what's happened is that interest, as well as my interest in preservation, collecting, hoarding, if you will, has all kind of just merged now into where I'm now trying to do something with all that. Because when I became a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker through the community television, I just always was looking for unusual and eccentric and odd stories. And just one thing I always just wound up doing was concentrating on collectors and collecting. Like I say, I was a collector. My mother never threw anything out, so my family's always kept things. I'm a keeper, and so what happened is I just developed this interest in what people keep. So I just, a lot of my films, video, short documentaries concentrate in that area, and I could go down the list of them. But what I just, with regards to me, and what happened, where I saw what was, since I was involved with WMUC, and I was everything I did there, the entire 4 years, 1979 to 1983, I worked at the College Station, and so there was a 75th anniversary exhibit, which Laura Schnitker had put together, professor at one of your colleagues at Maryland. She did this terrific exhibit over there, the Hornbeck Library, and I was super impressed. I had done an interview with Laura and provided some materials for the collection, but I saw that, wow, this is really something, and it happened to converge with what was coming up with the one documentary that's kind of been at my is top on my resume, if my CV, is Heavy Metal Parking Lot, which was done here in Maryland at the concert arena known as the Capitol Center. which is where we showed up with cameras, documented heavy metal fans in this arena parking lot. And we're still talking about it today, thankfully. This short documentary, which is, sort of a cult piece, but it's kind of crept into different mainstream pockets here and there. But it's just something that I had a collection around and an archive because I kept things. And what I pitched Chuck Howell with the Mass Media and Culture, and Laura, because she had done the WMUC exhibit with doing something to commemorate the 30th anniversary of Heavy Metal Parking Lot. And in fact, behind me is the one of the window clings that was created. It was there at the Performing Arts Library in 2016. We actually put together an exhibit and commemorated. It was a year-long exhibit. I was thrilled. It was and remains such a professional highlight for me to be able to have this exhibit in conjunction with my collection, my storage unit, my stuff, all acquired by Mass Media and Culture, which is where it's all on the shelves there. And I'm real happy that I have a Jeff Krulik collection, and it's anchored by this Heavy Metal Parking Lot. So that really was a testament, at least to me professionally and personally, that I could do something with what I had saved. And Chuck was very funny. I mean, he actually he said, because I had excess and a lot of stuff got returned to me, but everything went through the accessioning and process and was acquired. Things that were relevant were acquired and remain in the finding aids that you can see. But Chuck, said to me, hoarders are archivists in training. So, or, you could maybe put collectors there, but really hoarding and just stuff, having too much stuff is really what I certainly dealt with and continue to deal with, I might add. But that first pass, a lot of things are there in the collection. And I've since gone on to, I saw the potential. I saw and again, I'm not trained. I didn't study. I had my BA, but I'm somewhat self-taught. I mentioned in filmmaking, but also in the archivist arts and archiving. I've learned a lot. I might add, I'm a big fan, a big believer, and a big advocate for oral history, which I've gathered a lot and done a lot of in my filmmaking and documentary work. I've collected oral histories and always make sure that it's, that even though maybe sound bites here and there get into the films and videos, everything is important to save. Certainly in this day and age, it's much easier to digitize. When I was coming up, it's all physical media, analog, and which sometimes can be a problem. I might add, I'm a digital hoarder as well as a analog hoarder, but that's a separate issue. But having I think the wherewithal and the interest in saving has just kind of led me to this point where I can see the value in that academically. And so I've been working with John Davis the Performing Arts Library to try to build some other collections, including something and things to supplement the existing punk archive that's there, the punk collection. And there's things that have kind of crossed over. There's a Skip Groff collection. Skip Groff had Yesterday and Today Records and put out Limp Records, and also was a real mentor to Discord Records. And his collection is at Maryland. I'm working on a film about a band called The Raz, who were from in this area in the 1970s. And Tommy Keene, the late Tommy Keene, was a member of that band, and his collection is there's a collection of Tommy. Mike Schreibman, the Mike Schreibman collection, the poster collection, and well, his archives are at Maryland too. And Mike's in one of my documentaries, Led Zeppelin Played Here, as is Skip Groff. Funny, and that's a film about a phantom Led Zeppelin concert and whether it took place or not at the Wheaton Youth Center on Georgia Avenue. The building's no longer there, but it's where a lot of concerts were taking place in the early days. And the film's really more about the emergence of the concert industry as opposed to the band Led Zeppelin. But you know, and there's further digression. Brief. I'm not a huge Led Zeppelin fan. I'm not a huge heavy metal fan, but I'm an admirer, and I'm interested in their place in certainly their place in history. And even with punk, you know, I kind of was. It was a period of time when I didn't like keep up. My tastes evolved and, you know, or maybe just adapted, if not evolved. That's more like it. And I certainly like to think I have a broader range of interests, but all of these different subjects and you know, genres are part of my, you know, overall body of work. But the thing about I'm sorry, the film Led Zeppelin Played Here has some collectors in it, which is very interesting. And I'm sorry I can't show that to you. It's a feature film. Everything I do is online. Everything is available on either YouTube or Vimeo. And my website is a portal to these projects, these films. But, you know, it's when I recognize, in that case, I have two collectors. I have a local collector. They're both local. One is just had stuff everywhere in his basement. It was a hoard. But he was like a gigantic record collector, and named Tom Beach, Rolling Stones. But he, you know, there was it was a visual feast for me. So I included that and I had some stories that he talked about seeing the band and at the Laurel Pop Festival. But then the other collector that's in the film is this Brian Knapp, who's a world-class Led Zeppelin collector, whose collection is it's like a museum in his Alexandria, Virginia townhouse. It's really something to behold. And he even now has John Bonham's motorcycle in his living room. So I shot him. I did the interview in like 2011, and anyway, it's just grown, taken over his house. But he's got a motorcycle in the living room. But that it just showed two different types of collecting and private collectors, and then you got to wonder. I know in Brian's case, he's certainly looking for a home for that. Some collectors are more motivated to do that than others. Others just have all this stuff. And so I've been trying to, at the moment, work with John to try to create, there's a collector, I've done another documentary about a series called Punk and Tomatoes. And this is a individual, a local resident named Bill McKenzie, who used to he used to listen to my college radio show when I was on WMUC, and I even had him come up to the show as a community resident living in Silver Spring and play records. We became friendly. I would let him program his music from his punk rock collection, and so cut to many years later, I run into him. He turns out I live in Silver Spring now, and he lives nearby. And I learned that he loved growing tomatoes, and it was a different kind of side to him that I hadn't really been aware of before. And I, you know, just wanted to kind of do video with him talking about tomatoes and punk rock and growing tomatoes. And turns out though, he was a collector, he was a keeper, he was a hoarder. I mean, I didn't even realize the extent of it, but he would go to shows, and this guy used to really, and he was pretty known for his exuberance, I'll say, just on, and might get a little carried away, and have a bit much to imbibe, but he always seemed to have the presence of mind to take a flyer or take a set list. And I was not that person. I mean, I'm happy that I was able to keep and save some flyers here and there. Certainly if I know then, excuse me, now, I would have saved everything. This stuff was just all around all the time. But Bill, as drunk as he might have gotten, somehow was able to still grab flyers, set lists, and put them in a box. And this box was just huge, full. And he would take, everything, whatever, posters. And he would keep ads like the 930 Club. And the 930 Club used to do calendars, used to do postcards, and he had everything. And not just that, he had it all, in triplicate or more. He would just grab piles of stuff. So there was an amazing and astonishing trove. And so I made this whole series called Pumpkin Tomatoes on YouTube. And we kind of went through, he pulled the box out, and I'm taping them. And it's so funny, we spread everything out, and look at it on the his pool table, and he's just kind of ruminating on it. And he just talked about how this was how we did it. It was the internet of then. And I love that concept, the internet of then, which it really was. I mean, that's how people learned of things and, learned what was happening. Certainly, it was grassroots promotion. It was DIY. It was very punk rock. And Bill was right there inadvertently, not intentionally, but just somehow documenting it, saving all these just different bits and pieces of ephemera. And so I made this series, and it kind of culminated in this really legendary appearance by the band Fear on Saturday Night Live, where a lot of people went to the Saturday Night Live studio. A lot of punk rockers, including from DC, went up there and were invited by John Belushi, of all people, to be in the audience, be participants slam dancing while the band was playing, or just dancing, carrying on, stage diving, what have you. But it's kind of a notorious punk rock riot that shut down Saturday Night Live. And the cool thing was I was able to make this video because Bill had a friend who actually taped Bill's appearance on my show, my radio show, which I never had a copy of. And I didn't realize this was 6 weeks after, just weeks after it happened. I don't even know how long, but it was real primary source material, which was really incredible that there was this source that I just kind of stumbled into. And so I wove that into the piece. And again, that just kind of, I don't know, it just shows you what's possible, what's out there, which might, at least for me in my filmmaking, that things like that in my documentary work can really just pay dividends if you can uncover it and work with it. And so but Bill's collection, I'm now working to try to get that acquired, because Bill is from Maryland. Bill's a local, and Bill documented just collected this incredible trove of source material that will hopefully transition from his basement or his closet, into, or now in my storage unit, into an academic setting, and hopefully University of Maryland. But that's a current project I'm doing. I'm still doing other things along the lines of, wherever I can. Come on. Sorry, wasn't going to stop. But I just I look forward to any questions anybody might have, because I certainly, again, don't. These things are kind of like opportunities that have just sprung up as, again, from the connections and the people that I've met and made, and when I can see things that really, might have a home in an academic institution. Oh, I might add, one of my close friends, Mark Sosnick, who is another self-taught scholar. He didn't study he's a real maven for local history, and he wrote a book called Capital Rock, which is kind of the definitive local regional popular music history book. And Mark's from Greenbelt, Maryland, and I actually arranged to have his collection accepted by John and the Performing Arts Library. So that's really neat. It seems, again, that was a chance where I kind of saw that this is, I just kind of connected the dots in my head and thought this is something worth preserving and saving, and so I've made that a reality, along with all of Mark's tapes, all of his interview tapes that he did with many artists who aren't here anymore. But Jessica, should we turn it over to any questions people might have?
Yes. Oh, well, thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing all of your experience about, this kind of archiving by creating records of oral histories, and also, your work in bringing a lot of collections on local music to UMD and to the archive. Let me see. I'm gonna check in with our Q&A. If you have a question and you're in the audience, go ahead and ask it, and I can relate it here. Let me see. I'll give a minute or so. Let me see. I'm also happy to get things rolling here with a question that I think I can ask both of you. And with the different groups that you're working with, one idea I've been having here is, what are the ideas that the groups that you're covering and the individuals that you're working with, what ideas do they have about what materials will be used for and how they're portrayed in, if they are, taken into the archive or archive as tool rather than merely repository? And how do they hope that their work will be used? And I'd love to hear from both of you.
Well, I mean, for me, I know somebody like Mark is he's really into self, preserving what he's done, and so but I think we always joke about, we don't care, nobody cares about something now, but maybe 50 years from now, one person will be interested in what we've done and what we've, gathered and collected and saved. So, at least in that sense, I think everybody who who saves stuff, anybody who's a keeper of stuff somehow places value in that. And, especially with things that don't really have any value per se on the collecting market, that if it's just something that you believe is important, or whatever it is that you might have gathered that can really provide some historic context. I know, speaking for myself, it's great to know that there might be a place for that in a museum setting, which is really what I kind of look at this as.
Yeah.
Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I think the different groups we work with want to talk to us for different reasons. Some care about their legacy and wants their stuff somewhere, right? That's online. We don't have a physical repository. Everything we do is online. So others are interested in participating because they really want to know what other groups are doing, right? So when you're running one community music ensemble, you often don't know what other community ensembles are doing. So they see that as the price of learning what other groups are doing. They might want to steal some of their ideas. They might want to collaborate with them. A lot of them talked about, looking for people to collaborate with who might people who are very. These are particularly groups that are looking for collaborators who are not like them, right? They're looking for collaborators. A lot of them are interested in any publicity that they can get because they want more gigs, right? So they do. I mean, but I would say that, yes, there is interest in the preservation part, but I don't think for most groups is their number one priority.
Yeah. There's a question in the chat from an attendee. What do you think the institutions like state universities and public libraries have to offer collectors that are wary of donating materials? And this seems to be somewhat that can be answered by both of you. And then for Jeff, for you as a donor to UMD, what do you consider the strengths and weaknesses of archivists at institutions like UMD and others?
I think for me, I haven't encountered I haven't seen anybody's reluctance yet I think that certain things maybe, sometimes people are really interested in getting paid. I think that motivates people if you can provide a cash, some money buying something. I mean, whatever the dollar value is, I don't know. I mean, some things might be unrealistic, but I think, and again, a lot of things goes back to like, if something's really not worth anything individually, but it seems worth something in the entire collection or in the total package. I mean, and people can come up with a dollar figure that might motivate. Maybe that's, I don't really know. Like for instance, at the punk collection at Maryland, I know there's a Sharon Cheslow flyer collection, and I believe that was actually a purchase. I don't know about some of the other, but I think certain people like Skip Groff, I know that his wife, I mean, I'm sure Maryland was a place that he felt very connected with because he was a big WMUC booster and a music person who went to Maryland and just is from, and it just made perfect sense. And I think that's, in some ways, it seems like a no-brainer for certain people, and others, might take a little convincing, and that's just up to the individual, archivist or librarian or someone to really sell the idea. Or if that doesn't work, come up with a dollar amount if you really think it's worth getting. And now it seems like it's more competitive because it's certainly like with punk that there's other institutions that are doing the same thing right here locally. And, there's the DC Punk Archive at the library with the library. And I think, good grief, I mean, there's fanzines, there's other there's so many other collections that seem to have sprung up. So it seems like it might be more competitive now for institutions. Is that true? Or does that ring a bell? Eric, are you encountering?
Oh, Eric, you're muted.
I don't know I don't know anything about the punk situation. But with
what with what you're experiencing.
Yeah, is it competitive with famous people? Yes. But I think we're dealing with a limited number of people where it's really competitive. In terms of answering the question, what do institutions have to offer? I think the answers are very practical. Institutions usually have space, and institutions have gigs. So if they feel like if you want their collections bad enough, you can't, turn them down if they ask if you can get a concert, right? Right. I mean, I think that's logical in their minds, and I don't think it's illogical that, you know, if you think, you know, it's worthwhile for them to don't to take their collection that, you know, is offering them a concert if they're a musician, or at least a talk or something, might not be unreasonable ask from the musician. Yeah, but the other thing is they see all the empty classrooms at night and they have to rent rehearsal space.
Interesting.
That is a really great and unique point you bring up about specifically performing arts groups. It is not only finding maybe an institutional partner for storing materials or having a repository or making those materials publicly accessible, but also developing partnerships for performance, for gigs, for also keeping that actual performing life alive as well. Let me see, for both of you, has that been a part of any agreements or talks in the collecting and archiving that you've done, or in the discussions of where an institutional home makes sense?
I think a lot of it is due to, you know, some relationship building too. I mean, I think it's at least I don't know where. I mean, I'm sorry, Jessica. I was just thinking about something else when you were asking that, just about how these in regards to the you know, some of the high profile individuals or artists or archives that somebody might have, and how you have to maybe really develop the relationship if you or partner with people that can help, you know, make a collection a reality. I know that there's some real high profile collections, you know, Bob Dylan's collection, the Lou Reed collection, and there's all the beat poets. I mean, you can just there's I think one person. I mean, you can kind of Google this stuff and see who the kind of linchpins are that are kind of helping to drive this stuff. And I think for the individual archives and curators and librarians like on campus at University of Maryland, I mean, I think it pays to really kind of look to who might have an archive that you might want to reach out to, you know, like somebody like David Simon. What's he going to do with his body of work, with his collection of material, or George Pelecanos, the writer, or whoever. I mean, I'm just thinking about my contemporaries, but everybody's got, especially whoever's in some, you know, profession that might have some resonance or currency, or in the arts. If somebody can, if you can visualize a home for something, then it pays to really develop that relationship now, while they're still on this mortal coil, before you then have to deal with, you know, an estate or a family. At least that's this is some way how I think what I'm also being motivated by to pursue and to kind of connect some dots for people, especially when they don't really think about it or see it themselves.
Yeah, thank you both. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Eric.
Now, to answer the question, no, it is never a part of any agreement, because I can't offer it, right? I can't, it's a promise I often cannot fulfill. So I tell them, no, I can't promise anything. But I think they appreciate that answer, actually, that I tell them straight. But I do, I mean, I also am involved in various community organizations that do ask for musicians, and I recommend these people, and people have gotten gigs through me in various ways. So they know it's a I mean, you know, I don't tell them that, you know, this is done, but you know, they talk to each other, and if they want to know, they can, yeah, they know how connections are set up and things like that.
Thank you both. I have one more question in the chat for Jeff, and then I'll offer you some closing remarks. I know we're about at time here. So Jeff, if you would like to maybe quickly comment on, can you describe a couple highlights from your donated papers? And the link to the finding aid has been shared already as well.
Oh, great. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I was actually thinking I would provide some links about even just my body of work, or some of the things I've talked about that I'd be happy to forward to you, Jessica, which you might maybe distribute. I think gosh, when I gave everything, I mean, a lot of the stuff, like the heavy metal parking lot material was sort of organized. I mean, I had things done with at least by year, or at least we had already done like a timeline. There were things that were in place that could kind of make some kind of archival sense, some context. I think the other things, because they took everything, at least at the moment, and then as it was culled, I got a lot of stuff back, which I still have a hard time dealing with because I can't throw anything out, but I need to figure out. I mean, I don't need multiple copies of certain. I mean, it was a very interesting lesson, and I see how things are done, and how, but I also it was just kind of at that arc, that analog digital pivot point. There was still a lot of stuff that I had, and things that I still value, but all of it made it into the collection, which is neat. It's just one thing I really would like to do, especially when I'm still around, is kind of provide additional context for it, because that's I think might be a liability for some folks when you get a collection, when something shows up and you don't really have any context for things. I mean, I can provide that, but I have to devote the time to do that, and I intend to. But I'm just really thrilled that so much made it in. I'm a believer in, again, context, and I want to have that additional information. And I think that's what's neat about like what's happened with the online, the punk archive that's now online, that's very user friendly. See, that's another thing. I think I have a problem with some collections that aren't very user friendly, at least for civilians and for people that aren't in the academic universe. You kind of need that, I think, to kind of further establish a foothold in this and sell the collection. But I personally, I'm just delighted that everything at least is there, and it's now up to me to help provide some additional context.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let me see. We're already 3 minutes over, but would both of you like to offer any final closing words on how the current state of the field is in terms of collecting on, and more importantly, documenting the activities of these performing arts groups?
Eric, I talked too much. Go ahead.
No. I mean, in terms of Asian American ensembles, not much. There are archives who really, I mean, University of California, Santa Barbara is an archive that really specializes in Asian American things. Obviously various historical like Chinese historical societies, Chinese American museums, Japanese American museums, etc. They specialize in it, but most musicians I'm talking to don't have a place for their archives. I think that's reality. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of echo. I think that's true in at least a lot of what I'm surrounding. There's these people that they don't think it. They're not thinking that these things have archival currency, or that they could maybe even work with an institution or find a place for something. So I like the challenge that is ahead to try to deal with. I mean, I dealt with my stuff, and I'm still dealing with stuff. I might add that I've been inheriting stuff from people, so I got to then deal with their stuff, and it's just a whole ongoing challenge. But I welcome it. I'm happy to have a connection now to to Maryland, ongoing. And if it doesn't work in Maryland, maybe there's someplace else.
Well, I will say again, on behalf of the folks here at SCIPA and also here at the iSchool, thank you so much, Eric and Jeff, for sharing your time, sharing your experiences, sharing your expertise with us. Let me see. I hope to see many of you who are attending today at the Editathon or the other event, the Musicology Colloquium in December. In the meantime, if you have questions you didn't get answered here, please feel free to be in touch. I am happy to connect those questions where they might want to go. And like I said, more information also, please be in touch. Happy to make connections across the board. Let's see, anything from our iSchool friends before we close out the session today?
Just a hearty thank you. Sorry, Travis.
No,
Thank
you're
you
good.
so much, Jeff and Eric. Go ahead, Travis. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Thank you so much for your time. And also reach out to us if you have any additional questions about any of this. We're happy to share as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to make your, acquaintance, everybody, and happy to provide anything to anyone, students, faculty, staff. I live nearby. I'm happy to come over or do it like this or be, but thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.